spotlight and a story that has been in the spotlight for a number of years, the tragic death of Soleiman Faqiri, a man suffering from mental illness who died in jail back in 2016 while awaiting to be transferred to a psychiatric hospital. Well, an Ontario pathologist found the 30-year-old died after a violent struggle with prison guards. His brother Yusuf has been fighting for justice ever since his death. Now an inquest into his death will be taking place this year in November, and Yusuf joins me now. Yusuf, thank you so much, as always, for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me, Angie.
When you heard that this inquest is going to be taking place, finally, after so many years for pushing for it, what does this mean to you?
It's bittersweet, Angie, but it's a long time coming. It's almost 7 years since his tragic death, and for the first time in almost a decade, dare I say that we might have an opportunity for transparency into the beating death of Soleiman Faqiri. So it's been welcoming news, but at the same time, it took very long, almost 7 years since his tragic death. But we are looking forward, Angie, to having some transparency into his tragic death.
It's been a very difficult 7 years. In our conversations that you and I have had over that time, over the years, how have you and your family been coping?
It's been extremely difficult, Angie, you and I have had many conversations over the years. It's been painful to see what Soleiman went through, but what we're hoping in this inquest, that there will be able to be certain questions for it to be answered. Mm-hmm. Some of include, why was Soleiman never transferred to a hospital when he was ordered to? What was happening to him in those 11 days? Or why wasn't my family able to see him? And we need these answers so we can have some form of closure. Soli's gone, but there's many other Canadians and Ontarians that are suffering within the system that operates in a very opaque way away from scrutiny. And this is the inquest. The role of this inquest is to provide some transparency, but it's been a very painful almost 7 years.
What does the transparency need to look like? What must it look like? As you mentioned there, of course, for Soleiman's case, but for so many others as well.
We need to know what happened, Angie. How did a man with a mental illness, a diagnosed mental illness, taken temporarily into custody, being beaten to death, and then given to his family in a body bag, yet in those 11 days, family doesn't know what happened to him? What transparency looks like is this is a case it's a case of a public interest, is that there's so many people that go into the system, and when they return, they're given to their families in body bags. So Ontarians and Canadians need to know what happened here, and when these issues and aspects happen to people with mental illness, what are the mechanisms to remedy these issues, right? The transparency looks like, what happened to Soli? Why wasn't he transferred? Why wasn't his family not able to see him? What was happening to him in those 11 days? All too often, Angie, you'll notice in correctional system, at all levels of provincial government, there's no external investigators. So what ends up happening is families don't know what happened to their loved ones. And this is why this case is so important. It's not about Soleiman anymore. Mm-hmm. It's not about the Faqiri family, Angie. It's about people suffering from mental illness. And this case is a microcosm of how people with mental illness are treated within the incarceration system. And this is why it's so important. And that's why my family is welcoming all Canadians to come in and join us in this inquest. But transparency needs to happen so another death does not happen to someone like Soleiman.
What else do you want to see change when it comes to how mental health cases are handled, when it comes to the police being involved?
I want accountability into people that suffer from mental illness when they die. I want people with mental illness, Angie, to be treated with dignity and respect. And I want the appropriate practitioners to support and help people with mental illness. Not law enforcement or correctional officers, but psychiatrists, nurses, mental health workers, people that have the tools to take care of people with mental illness. Fists and cuffs will not go in solving people with mental illness, but compassion and dignity and appropriate tools. And we need that because Soli didn't have that, but there's so many other Canadians that are needing that. And if we have that, many more lives will be saved, Angie. And this inquest, the recommendations that will come out of it can go a long way in having systemic legislative change in the future.
Before I let you go, Yusuf, between now and November, it's a few months away. What are you going to be pushing for further? Because as you say, this inquest is going to be so important, so critical, in hopes of getting that transparency. Where do things go for you right now from until that point?
When Soli was buried, after we received his body many years ago, I made a promise to him that I was going to fight for Canadians suffering from mental illness. Our story continues after this inquest confirms what we're going to do between now and November is that we're going to continue to talk to our partners and supporters across the country to join us in this fight for building a better Ontario and a better Canada for people with mental illness. And we're going to be pushing the same message, Angie, for all of us, is the government needs to articulate transparency, not lip service, transparency, and telling us what happens to people. And this is what's important.
Yeah.
And over the coming months, we're going to make sure that we receive that.
Yusuf, I really appreciate you giving us your time. And as always, our deepest condolences to you and your family. Yusuf Faqiri, brother of Soleiman Faqiri. We'll talk again soon, Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Angie.
You're welcome.